All right, today we're diving into one of the most powerful, most complicated figures in the entire world of The Witcher, the Emperor of Nilfgaard, Emhyr var Emreis. Now, this is a name that commands both absolute terror and, believe it or not, a little respect. He's a conqueror who literally redrew the map of the continent. But behind that iron crown is a story so weird, so twisted, it's basically a nightmare fairy tale. Let's get into it.
In that quote, man, it just nails it, doesn't it? We're talking about a guy whose name alone makes kings tremble. As the ruler of this massive, unstoppable empire, his armies have just rolled over entire kingdoms. To pretty much everyone, he is the single most powerful man alive, period.
But of course, that's not the whole story. Not even close. The man who commands legions and decides the fate of the continent, well, he's got a secret past. One that's so bizarre and so tragic, it feels like it was ripped from the pages of a very, very dark storybook. A past filled with a horrifying curse, a hidden identity, and a desperate, lonely fight just to survive.
Okay, so to really get the man, you've got to understand the emperor first. Let's start with the face he shows the world, the formidable, terrifying persona known as the White Flame of Nilfgaard.
I mean, just look at the titles: Emperor, Lord, Sovereign. Each one of those represents a land that was conquered and brought to heel. His entire reign has been about one thing, and one thing only: relentless, brutal expansion. He's a brilliant strategist, a completely ruthless politician, and he has thrown the northern kingdoms into bloody wars not just once, but over and over again. All for the glory of the empire.
And that quote right there, that tells you everything you need to know about his mindset. For Emhyr, there's no such thing as compromise. There's no negotiation. There is only the destiny of Nilfgaard, and in his mind, that destiny is to rule everything. It's this absolute, unbending conviction that makes him so incredibly dangerous.
Which, brings us right back to that central mystery. How did this supremely powerful emperor even come to be? Well, the answer is genuinely shocking, because for a huge chunk of his life, he wasn't human at all.
So, let's start peeling back those layers. Let's uncover the story of a cursed prince forced into hiding and living under a completely different name.
You've really got to see the two sides of his life to believe it. On one hand, you have the mighty Emperor Emhyr, and on the other, you have Duny, the Urcheon of Erlenwald. Now, Urcheon is an old word for hedgehog, and yeah, that's exactly what the curse turned him into. A monstrous, beast-like man forced to hide his royal blood from the entire world.
So where did this curse come from? Pure political cruelty. When Emhyr was just 13 years old, his father, the emperor, was overthrown in a violent coup. The sorcerer working for the new usurper transformed Emhyr into this monstrous form as a twisted joke, you see, because Emhyr sounds like urchin in a local dialect. After they murdered his father, they just set the dogs on him and left him to die in the woods. But he didn't die. He survived. Exiled and alone, he somehow makes his way north, and in a wild twist of fate, he saves the king of Cintra's life. As payment, he calls on the ancient, binding law of surprise. 15 years later, he shows up to claim his prize, the king's daughter, Princess Paved, and it's at her chaotic betrothal feast where everything comes to a head. A perfect storm of destiny, true love, and a very chance encounter with Geralt of Rivia finally breaks the curse.
Okay, so we've got to talk about the law of surprise, because it is a huge deal in this world. Think of it like a debt of fate. It allows someone who saves a life to claim something the saved person has, but doesn't know they have yet. In King Rognar's case, that turned out to be his unborn daughter, Paved. This powerful tradition becomes the engine that drives this entire story.
So, just like that, the curse is broken. Duny marries Paved, and they even have a daughter, a little girl named Cirilla. And for a second, right, it almost seems like a storybook ending is actually possible. But the shadow of Nilfgaard is very, very long, and the ambition of its lost prince, well, that was just sleeping. It wasn't gone. And this, right here, leads to his next terrifying transformation. The man known as Duny had to die so that Emperor Emhyr var Emreis could be reborn.
This is where the story takes a really dark turn. Emhyr finds out about a prophecy connected to Ciri, and he decides it's time to take back his throne. He plots with the treacherous sorcerer Vilgefortz to fake his entire family's death in a shipwreck. But the plan goes horribly wrong. Paved figures it out, and in the struggle, she falls overboard and drowns. Emhyr is the only one who makes it back to Nilfgaard.
When he gets back, he leads a successful revolt and seizes the throne. And then, he does one of the most ruthless, symbolic things you can possibly imagine. He doesn't just execute his enemies. Oh no. He has their gravestones dug up and uses them to pave the floor of his own ballroom, just so he can literally dance on their graves for the rest of his life.
And that is how he earns his infamous name, dated when Adan incarn ep movuth, the white flame dancing on the barrows of his enemies. Every single step he takes in his own palace is a step on the memory of those who wronged him. What a chilling, unforgettable statement of power and pure vengeance.
So now he's the emperor again, and his focus shifts completely. Everything becomes about the daughter he left behind, and this search turns into the obsession that will define his entire reign.
From this moment on, every war, every plot, every decision, it all comes down to finding Ciri. She is the child of the elder blood, the key to a massive prophecy, and Emhyr is absolutely convinced that their reunion is his ultimate destiny.
And he is absolutely relentless. He starts massive wars, using the chaos as a smokescreen to search for her. He orchestrates massive political coups to try and grab her. He hunts down anyone who gets in his way. And most disturbingly, the prophecy called for him to have a child with Ciri, his own daughter, and he was fully prepared to see it through.
After years and years of this brutal search, he finally has her. He corners her at Stygia Castle. Geralt and Yennefer are his prisoners. His grand, terrible plan is finally within reach. But then, when he actually sees his daughter's face, broken and weeping at the thought of losing her adoptive parents, something inside the cold, ruthless emperor finally cracks.
In this just astonishing moment of humanity, he lets her go. He just turns his back on the prophecy on his life's greatest ambition and allows Ciri to go back to Geralt and Yennefer, the only family she's ever really known. It might be the one and only time his heart ever overruled his head.
Which brings us to his legacy. After decades of war, obsession, and unimaginable cruelty, how does the story of the White Flame finally end?
Well, as you can see in the games, his end isn't really set in stone. It kind of reflects the different parts of his life. If his final war fails, all that ruthlessness comes back to bite him, and he gets an assassin's blade from his own people. If he wins, well, his ambition is fulfilled and he rules everything. But there's a third path, one that speaks to the father he became at the very end. If he wins, and Ciri comes back to him, he can choose to give it all up and place his daughter on the throne as the new empress.
So in the end, who was Emhyr var Emreis? Was he the monster his enemies saw, the tyrant who literally danced on gravestones? Or was he the tragic prince, cursed and betrayed, just trying to reclaim a stolen destiny? The truth, I think, is in the contradiction. He was a man who was forged by the monster he was forced to become, but who was ultimately defined by the father he chose to be.